Welcome again. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Firstly, a big thanks to the Stanford Innovate Ed team for having us on this very interesting session. I'm Raja Akunuru, Director of Customer Services at Cadmium, and I'm joined by my colleague, Andrew.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm a continuing education specialist with the UNC Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center, and I'm also excited to be here to talk about this topic. I think it's right in line with what we've all been hearing about today.
Absolutely, Andrew. Can't wait to talk through this. Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about learning objectives first. What we're going to learn in the next 45 minutes. So the session title is Pixel Prompts and Possibilities. And as a part of it, we are going to do 4 key things as part of this session. First, we are going to look at how you could become, you can beautify your LMS, learning management system, or any other web property that you're managing without necessarily being a full-time web developer or necessarily being a full-time coder. So we'll talk about how you can leverage generative AI and become a designer, at least to some capacity, and help present a more polished interface for your learners. The second one, we are going to talk about a lot of hands-on AI tools. Andrew has been pretty deep into using generative AI for different applications. So he's going to walk us through some hands-on use cases about how you can leverage generative AI and some of those tools to improve your user interface, which could mean improving your buttons, having a different layout, talking about your menu items, thinking about styles, and different aspects of making your web page look polished and professional. Third, we are going to talk about accessibility and how you could leverage the generative AI tools to become 𝗬𝗂𝗃𝗃 and other compliant-based methods, how you can leverage the system to become more compliant in those areas. Because in the academic CE/CME world, we all know that compliance is not an option. We do want to make sure that whenever we are presenting CE or CPD to our learners, the content is not only pretty to look at, it is also broadly encompassing various learner types. So to actually deliver compatible content, it is actually helping you all reach more learners and increase your learner outcomes, because you are actually catering to different learner styles and different learner abilities. So we will talk a little bit about how that would be of help. And then the last one, you're going to see a lot of live demo. And the fun part is you all get to give inputs to make the prompts work better. So we did want to make this a little interactive. So Andrew will be talking about some demos, but he will be asking you to give inputs in terms of how to improve the prompt. So keep your hands ready, have your prompting caps on if you could, and then give us suggestions on how to make the prompt better. And this way we feel like it is going to be very, very hands-on at the end of this meeting. So hopefully our goal is once you are off this meeting, you have some ideas on how you can use some prompts and then build professional looking pages. Andrew, anything else you wanted to add at this point?
No, I think that
wonderful. Next slide, please, Andrew.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. So a little bit about why this session is important or why this matters for CE/CME providers. We all know that web developers or web resources are expensive, and not all of us would have continuous access to web resources. So when budgets are tight, and I'm sure we all are facing the pinch in terms of tighter and tighter budget constraints, using generative AI tools will help you all to fill that part-time web developer, web designer type of role without necessarily getting too deep into coding or programming. So we'll see how you don't have to be a designer in the truest sense or a developer to start leveraging generative AI. Second, we will talk about how you can leverage generative AI tools to further customize your site. How can you make your buttons align with your organizational branding? How can you make the styles align with what your organization or your marketing team wants you to offer? So we'll talk about those things and see how it can get that to you, how you can get to those aspects quicker with generative AI. Also, the second component as far as customization is concerned is speed. Instead of relying on external resources or other departments to give you the CSS code, having that power and control on your end will actually help you to deliver these changes in a matter of hours rather than weeks or multiple weeks. The third, we'll talk about this multiple times. How do you ensure your web property meets accessibility and compliance standards? As we discussed earlier, it's not optional. In this age, we all know how important it is to have accessibility features on your website, not only for your grant requirements, but also to meet different kinds of learners. So having those web properties compliant with accessibility standards helps you to get to more learners in a quicker manner. Fourth, we will talk about how do you leverage this for having a more professional design to your properties. A lot of us have seen how phishing attacks happen and how poorly designed web pages often look skeptical. So it is important to note that having a professional design is not only to make sure your learners get a good experience, it is also making your learners feel more secure when they're visiting your website. So well-designed websites present that polished look for your organization and also instill confidence in your learners so that they feel confident that they are looking at a legitimate site, not a site from a hacker or someone who's trying to get into the system. So that's the fourth. And then the last one is LMSs or any technology is great when it works, but we also know that there's variability in terms of what each LMS can provide, learning management system, or what each content management system can provide in terms of its theming or configuration abilities. By making sure that you're able to have your own CSS code, your own HTML code, you're reducing the reliance on external LMSs, or even reducing the variability between one LMS to the other. You own the content, you have a solid process about how you want to have the CSS code. And then even if you have to switch technology systems, you don't have to worry about what are the inherent capabilities of that platform, because you have sort of keys to the kingdom when you're going through that. So hopefully these 5 reasons give us good motivation to go through this session. And really the high point behind all of these is giving you more control over how to design web properties in your learning management system. The session is going to focus more on learning management system, but whatever we're going to learn, it is fairly transferable for a content management system or any other event management system that you're trying to manage or host. Next slide, please. Perfect. All right. So a little bit of interactivity. We want to get a little bit of feedback from you all before we get started with the demo. So let's start with a polling question here. You're welcome to type in your responses in the poll. And so our first question is, what's your current HTML or CSS experience? And we have 3 options here: never written code, basic familiarity, regular user. So if you could type in your responses in the chat, all answers are acceptable. We see a few answers trickling in.
I love that one answer.
Love it.
But ChatGPT helps.
Right? Love it when I see that.
Yeah, and these are great. I love the never written code before, because this session is for you. We're going to go over a lot of foundation basics to published on your webpage. So this will be great.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for those questions. And one more question, and then we'll jump into the demo. Polling question number 2.
Yep.
All right. Now we want to understand a little bit more about AI tools that you've tried. ChatGPT, Claude, GitHub Copilot, or Windsurf? None of the above. Wonderful. We're seeing ChatGPT, a few Copilot responses coming in. There you go. We have both.
I suspected a lot of Copilots because I'm sure that's a institutionally provided AI program. So in a sense, you know it's allowed because it's encouraged.
Yeah. It's very Microsoft and prevalence of Microsoft. Yep. Copilot can only grow at this point.
Right.
All right. Wonderful. So we have a couple of good mix of ChatGPT and Copilot. The good thing is, fear not, whatever AI tool you're using, our hands-on exercises are fairly transferable. So when Andrew walks through these, you're welcome to use your own tool, and then feel free to share your output as well, because we're going to learn from each other as well as part of our review. Andrew, anything else you wanted to add before we jump on to the demo?
Yeah, there's a little bit more. I'm gonna switch over to this slide. So especially since we've had a number of people here that have not written any HTML or CSS code before, or probably ventured into the web development side of their LMS management, what you need to know before you get started, even using AI, is probably going to be helpful. So before we explore those tools, let's just clarify some of those foundational knowledge points that you might think you need. And the great thing is that when AI is helping you, there's not as much as you think. So there's really three core concepts. First, you have HTML, and that's the structure of your page. And since it's Halloween season, let's think of that as the skeleton of your web page. That's the structure. It defines what the heading is, or what the paragraph is, what the image is. And you don't need to memorize every HTML tag. You just need to understand that HTML creates the bones of your content, if you will. So, and then paired with that often is CSS. That's the styling. CSS is going with our same analogy, that is the skin to your skeleton. That is, it controls the colors and the fonts and the spacing, the layouts. And in the same thing, you don't need to memorize every CSS property. You need to understand that CSS is what makes things look good. And we've mentioned a number of times, because it is really important in our field, is accessibility compliance and the fundamentals of that. So that's another really helpful foundational knowledge to know. WCAG, or I think it's pronounced WCAG sometimes. That's the accessibility standard that we have to abide by. It's non-negotiable. But understanding those foundational concepts like color contrast, or keyboard navigation, what a screen reader will read, essentially the compatibility with your website, and alternative text for images. So as we're going to talk about, AI can help you implement all of these, but you need to know why they matter at first to begin with. So here's where AI transforms everything. It really fills your knowledge gaps in real time. You don't need to take a 6-week boot camp before you get started. It's great to do that, but when you don't know how to center an image, you ask AI. When you don't know how to change the font, you can ask AI in a number of different ways. So when you need to even check the contrast for accessibility, you can ask AI and it'll give you a quick answer. But then having that foundational knowledge, you also know that you need to verify it with a reputable program or organization. So as you're going to see today, too, we're going to learn by doing with AI as your behind-the-shoulder instructor. And that's exactly what we're going to be. So to get started, for those that have never done any of this before, let's build our toolkit. I've organized this into 3 categories to make it clear which type of tool does what for you. First, you have a code editor. This is where you'll actually write and edit your HTML and CSS. Visual Code Studio is my top recommendation, and probably every other web developer's top recommendation. There are others out there that are more simplistic and have been around for decades, but this one has a lot of free and powerful extensions that go along with it, both AI and not. And it also has the largest community support. So that's important in and of itself, because if you're using a generative AI tool, you want it to be able to refer to a large body of text available, and Visual Code Studio has that. So if you ask a question on how to get something set up on Visual Code Studio, there's plenty of information out there. ChatGPT or any generative AI will be able to help you. So the second category is a little bit more nuanced if you're already working in the code itself. There's AI coding apps to go right along in your code editor, like Visual Studio Code. These are extensions that integrate directly into that. Windsurf and GitHub Copilot are the more popular ones. They sit right inside your editor, and they'll give you real AI suggestions as you type. So not necessarily going between another browser or another page to your code editor, to your website. It's right there, really at your side, helping you out. So this is that second category is optional, but it's incredibly helpful once you're comfortable with the basics. I will say the Copilot does require a subscription, but at least the other one that I recommended, Windsurf, has a free tier, and I've used that one extensively. You do not need these on day one. They're worth exploring as you build confidence, but like I said, the second category there is optional. The third category is the generative AI platform. This is where we pulled from the beginning to see what most of you were using, and unsurprisingly, a lot of people said they have some experience with ChatGPT. Claude's another big one that I like to use. Google Gemini, that's actually what we're going to be using today.
The mic's off.
Yep, I activated my Google doing that. So these platforms, you'll describe what you want in plain English, and they'll generate the code for you. So most of you have already had access to at least one of these platforms. And for what we're doing today, the free versions work beautifully. Paid subscriptions just give you faster responses and more advanced features, but they're not required. So here's my recommendation for getting started. Pick one generative AI platform you're already comfortable with, pair it with a simple code editor like VS Code or something more simple like Notepad++. And that's all you need for your first project. As you grow more confident, then you can explore the AI coding extensions that would go into your code editor. And you can mix and match these tools however works best for you. There's so many resources even outside of AI that you can use to get into web development that it can be overwhelming. But for the purposes today, we've got our code editor and our Gen AI platform, and that's where I'm going to show you. But first, let's talk about the term prompt engineering. So this is really the secret sauce to all of this, and it's where you've probably seen a lot of the you'll get some good output or bad output, and it's easy to blame AI, but you can also improve your prompts, and it's an iterative process. So this is the skill that separates the not so good output with the really good output. It's not complicated, it just requires being really intentional. So, but the first principle I have here is you're going to write clear, specific prompts. Instead of saying, for instance, make me a button, you can say, create an accessible call to action button that says enroll now. And of course, with high contrast color for accessibility. The more specific you are, the closer the AI gets to what you actually want on your first try or so. So second, you're going to set your parameters up front. Tell AI your constraints before it starts generating the code. For example, I'm working in an LMS that does not allow JavaScript. I need inline CSS only. I need this design to meet WCAG 2.2 standards. Our brand colors are such and such. When you establish these boundaries at the beginning, AI works with them automatically, and it'll get you closer to what you had in mind. So third, iterate through conversation. Your first prompt rarely produces a perfect result. I'm sure we've all seen that by now. This is where AI shines. You can refine through dialogue, make your font larger, change the layout, add more padding around this image. Each refinement gets you closer to your vision. And when you get better at managing the code or start to recognize what it's doing, you can then take what it gives you and add to it. So finally, and this is crucial, treat AI as a collaborator. It's not magic. It's not going to develop the whole web page for you in one go. You're still going to have work to do, but it's going to make things a lot faster and easier. You're still ultimately the decision maker in everything, and you know your learners, your brand, your institutional requirements. AI is going to generate options, and you choose what works. So think of it like working with a junior designer who's incredibly fast, but needs your direction and feedback. That's where the relationship, that is the relationship that we're building. Okay. So now we're going to talk about what a good prompt actually looks like. And before I start, obviously these pictures are AI generated. I wasn't sure how I felt about this one, but when I typed into the generative AI, what is the anatomy of a good prompt? Apparently that's what this is. So this is what we're going to be looking at. So first, a bad prompt. I already mentioned it earlier. Make me a button. So in the chat, what else could we add? Anything that you could think of to make this a little bit better, whether it's, I don't know, color or maybe rounded corners, something like that. Something to grab your learner's attention. And I'm going to answer for everybody. So, of course, it's basically just
And we just
polite.
got one update
Oh, yeah?
from Bre. Yeah, shape, color, and size.
Oh, okay. Well, mostly I was gearing towards you have to be polite, because we all know how this movie ends. But it's still a bad prompt. Better prompt. That might look more familiar with what Bre said. We're going to specify enroll now. We're going to give it white font, medium size with rounded corners, and maybe a hover effect. I think even in this demonstration today, I hope everybody who doesn't normally do web design starts to appreciate it a little bit more, because buttons have a lot of impact on how many impressions your site gets, or how many clicks it'll get to enroll a customer. So if that's a better prompt, what is the best prompt? Now, to get the best prompt, it's just going to be a lot more information, right? And it could get lengthy. It could be call to action button, define the content, the technical aspects, making sure there's no JavaScript, anchor tags, accessibility compliant, text color, the list goes on. But the nice thing is I don't have to write all this. I didn't write all this. I asked AI what it needs to know for a good prompt. And I think that's a secret that not a lot of people really take advantage of. So AI will give me what is a good prompt to make a good button. And it'll give me the prompt, and then it'll bullet out the characteristics of that button or any kind of web property. And then I can go in there and just change what I need. It needs to be this color. It needs to be this shape. It needs to say this. So having that knowledge that you can ask AI what works best for it is really powerful. And it's gotten me some really good results on getting some output closer to what I had in mind. So with that being said, let's move over to the demonstration part. And we're going to do this together. So everybody get into the chat, and we're going to just come up with some. And Raja, I might need you to read the chat for me.
Sure thing.
If anybody responds to anything. But if hopefully you can see my screen, it's just your typical generative AI platform. I'm using Google Gemini, the 2.5 Flash version. So it's a paid subscription. But like I said earlier, you don't necessarily need the paid subscription for what we're doing here. So let's just get started. We're going to make a button. This is a bad prompt, but let's see what it does. I love it. So, okay, so it gave me the physics. So yeah, so terrible prompt. So I did not specify this was coding or web development of any kind. The output was not the greatest, but it also gave me a simple HTML button. So let's see what that looks like. And what I mentioned earlier is that the two things you really need are a generative AI platform and some sort of code editor or something similar. I'm not going to use Visual Code Studio, even though I've talked about it a lot, just because I like the example of something called CodePen, where I can take and I can just copy the components, the HTML, the CSS, and it'll show me the artifact down here. So that's a really simple click me button, and it grabs your attention, but I think we could do better. So let's make our prompt better and more specific. So give me some ideas. Think of some interesting characteristics of what could encourage people to click on. make me an HTML, CSS, call to action button. That is, we're going to do Stanford cardinal red, rounded corners. We're going to add a hover element. And that's all I can think of now. So let's see what happens. So yeah, sometimes it'll do this too. So here on the Gemini is it produced an artifact for me. It doesn't always do that, so I always like having a code editor available. And then I could just take the code itself and move it over to something I'm familiar with. I think there's just having that little bit more control is helpful. So we'll take that code that we used or that we just received as our output, put it into our staging site, for instance. And I've run into this before actually. So what we'll do is we'll take the full code example and see if that works. But sometimes these will add a bit more explanation than they need, and it'll make mistakes. I heard another presentation earlier saying ChatGPT does a lot of spelling mistakes. I don't think that's unique to ChatGPT, but coding mistakes happen too. So that's just another example of why you need a lot of evaluation and quality assurance. So here's our more sophisticated button. Apply now with a cardinal red and a hover effect. So I'll take it. But I know we can do better too with that. So before I move on to the next example, just for time's sake, I'm going to refer to the learning management system that I work with specifically for the UNC Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center out of the UNC School of Medicine. So we have our, it's our 𝗲𝗄𝐶e platform, if anybody's familiar with that. It's a Drupal configuration, so it allows a lot of customization within each editor applied here. And I think one of the best highlighted best examples of what a button could amount to be with enough work using AI is on our staging site. So this is not something that is available to the public. It's not even a real department, but it is a staging site. And if you go down here, you'll see that these buttons are a little bit more dynamic too. And this was all done using AI and a little bit of extra work on my part. But you see that there is a pretty advanced styling element to it for interactivity. And I think it really draws the eye to a really critical part of this site where it's directing the different audience types throughout the website. So this is a good button, or at least it's getting there. So I wanted to highlight that. And that's just as simple as a button, but we can do more. So let me go back to here. The next one we're going to demonstrate is a building complex layouts. So we're going to start off simple with a 3-box section with images and text. You know, creating a button is one thing, but if you really need to create the organization or structure of your site or your basic page so that you can put a series of courses or a series of faculty members with user accessibility and interactivity in mind, so that you know where you want your customers to go first, and just the sequence there. So let me go back to our generative AI. We're going to start a new, not temporary chat, a new chat here. So let's create a 3-box section. So make me an HTML, CSS 3-box section that contains a placeholder for an image in each box, as well as text below it. And we'll see what it comes up with. And see, it produced that artifact for me, so I might get a little bit of a preview of what it's like. Yeah, that's actually not bad. I still want to see the code itself. So we're going to get it here. Here's the HTML. We're going to clear this out. Let's see, that's just the HTML. And then the CSS. And that's a good example too for anybody who's not as familiar with coding. Without the CSS, here's the skeleton. Here's just the HTML. It really doesn't look good until I add that styling element to it. And by good, I mean still pretty bland. It's going to be the image placeholder here with some boxes that aren't quite the same size, so that's something we might have to address. But that's the nice part about this too, is that it doesn't have to look perfect. It doesn't have to look like that finished fancy button layout that I just showed you. So at least with our LMS, with 𝗲𝗄𝐶e, I can take this, the code associated with this, put it in the editor available on the basic page, and that allows me to then do some edits right to the text itself. So if I go to the editor, I can click source, I can add the code, and then go to the editor, and then I can double click on the image, add whatever image I want. I can change the text to whatever I want. And then make it look professional, more professional, or more aligned with your content, for goodness sakes. So let me show a little bit about that too. So going back to our 𝗲𝗄𝐶e learning management system, I have a couple examples of how I've used that structural organization developed by AI, but refined by me, so that it is engaging to the learners. So if I go to this one here, this was actually one of the first instances of using AI for our pages that I had. And as you can see, it's that 3-box structural design. It's got, it had a placeholder for an image, it had the text section, and then of course the take course button. And the image, I can't believe I have to have a disclosure for this, but disclosure, the images are not AI produced in this moment. But you can add an image that more closely associates with what the course is. So this is one of the first examples I have, and you'll see that common thread throughout our site. Here's another one that's just not really released yet, but it's now a 4-course module here. And then you can do a little bit more complicated with enough prompting and enough chatting. Things with more complicated table layouts. Sizing becomes a challenge. Adding the button, everything to format and have the similar theme throughout is a challenge. And it's not necessarily that I couldn't have made all of this myself at this point, now that I do have a foundational knowledge and a little bit of acumen with web development. But to build this with AI just took exponentially less time. So it's a powerful tool to use to have in your arsenal because as somebody said in the chat, we do wear a lot of hats now, and I cannot tell you how beneficial it's been knowing some basic coding for myself. Here's another example of just an example of the structure of a page, and it shows the variability of it. It's not just a 3 or 4 box next to each other. But real quick, that being said, if I go back to my chat, and I know it produced this 3-box selection in here. In the chat, or just think about it for a second, what else do you think we would need besides our own content? What else would take a lot of time or something that maybe we didn't think about? Anybody have any ideas of what is really important when it comes to websites? We've talked about it a couple times. All right, well, I'm going to say it in all caps here, and probably misspell it in the process. But now evaluate for accessibility standards. Yep, somebody got it. So it certainly did that. Now, this is AI. Their hallucinations are possible, but for the most part, it gets you where to start. And if you're like me, you may jump down to if it has like a more critical section. What are the most critical concerns for accessibility regarding WCAG 2.2 standards? So it can probably, with high confidence, identify at least the critical components that I can start working on right away. So, and it did that. There's one more item that we might be able to think of. What's another component? And I may be running close to time. Now we need mobile responsiveness. We've got our 3-box layout. What's going to happen when we change our display? Are the boxes going to align? Are they going to scrunch up together and make the images really tight? I don't know. Let's see. What did it say? I got a little bit of a look at it too, so I am kind of cheating. But it's probably already going to pass just because I saw some of the code and I'm a little familiar with it. But I can force it to be in mobile mode by using the inspect element of the browser. And yeah, it looks like it already did it for us, and we made sure. So that's where that foundational knowledge comes in. We can get it to produce the code, but we know that we need accessibility standards. We need mobile responsiveness, and that's why we can then take our, that's where our input matters and our governance of this. So let's stop there with the demonstration portion because we have a little bit more to go over. But back to the presentation itself.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah.
We have one question from Lauren.
Sure.
She is asking us, can you add styling code in the HTML or only basic stuff like bold, italics?
Oh, no, you can add any sort of styling. Specify font type, specify the attributes, having that foundational knowledge, knowing that you do need a header. You need, well, various header endpoints, ARIA labels for accessibility. But I hope it demonstrated that a little bit with some of the site examples too, because all of that really is styling that you saw. Otherwise, you're going to get the very basic, output that we talked about here. Just the skeleton. So it can, anything you've seen on a web page can be produced really by AI with the right prompting. I think that's the important part. I've created buttons with animation. I've really created whole sections with some basic animation stuff, at least where my imagination can go. So, and in the web development community is pretty open to that. If you see something on a web page that you like, do not be afraid to go on here and click that inspect element and discover what's really making it tick. And that then you can take that and replicate similar using AI or your own foundational knowledge. So I hope that helps, but happy to answer more from my experience. All right, so I'm gonna, no problem. I'm gonna quickly go through this just a little bit. Beyond the buttons, and this might answer some of your question too. Beyond the buttons, what else can you build? Some of the things that I've done are course navigation menus. That's actually been pretty helpful because if you're familiar with an application like 𝗲𝗄𝐶e, we have something called learning groups that are basically different instances of your learning management system meant to provide customization to different groups. So I can create their own custom navigation menus using AI pretty quickly without the need of a contracted web developer. Faculty directories, basically with a more glorified box setup like we showed. The stylized emails and reminders, that's pretty powerful too, like Raja mentioned earlier. And it never really dawned on me before, but you don't necessarily always want your reminder emails to be in plain text because that's really easy to replicate for nefarious actors. You want them to have professional elements to it. You want them to have your institutional branding. And that's where AI can help you with the HTML, at least for that. And these other here are fairly self-explanatory. Announcement banners, image overlays, call-out boxes. So I'll go ahead and move on from there. I think this is, yep. So ethical AI use and limitations. Before we go further, this is critical, especially in healthcare education where we handle sensitive information. First and foremost, data privacy. never paste protected health information, student records, personal faculty details, or any confidential institutional data into AI prompts. These platforms process your inputs on external servers, and once you paste something, you've potentially exposed it. If you're working with real patient cases, student information, I mean, I wouldn't put any of that in generative AI, but if there's anything you're even not sure of, just anonymize it. Use numbers, IDs that are not associated with an account. Second, obviously verify everything. We were trying to build a website button. We accidentally we sewed a button somewhere, I think, as our first prompt. So AI is powerful, but it's not perfect. It can generate code that looks correct, but has subtle errors. Verifying and recognizing that those errors can happen are really important. And then follow institutional guidelines and policies, of course. Every institution, I would imagine, has some AI-related guidelines that we need to follow. And UNC has their own. I'm sure 𝗲𝗲𝗃𝗲 with cadmium has their own. Yeah, probably. So real quick, just troubleshooting. Things are going to go wrong. Your code's not always going to work. You're going to paste it into your LMS, and it's going to break the layout in ways that you didn't know. So you don't panic. You go back to your prompting. You rework how you ask something or start a new chat altogether. AI will analyze, or add the error code in, and AI will help you determine what went wrong. LMSs do have specific constraints. So, a lot of times you're not allowed to use JavaScript. CSS can be limited, things of that nature. So let me move on from there. Sorry, Raj, I went over. So it's yours.
Oh, no worries, Andrew. This was fantastic. So I'm sure
Thank you.
we all grasped a lot of these. So I'll be quick. I know we just have a couple of minutes. As Andrew has said, institutional compliance is very, very important. It goes along with the AI ethics component. Definitely follow the branding and approval workflows. Make sure you're getting the necessary permissions from third party or whoever holds the license or copyright for that image, and then document the design decisions so that if anyone else came back and said, why are we using that specific color for this button? You can always go back to your documentation and say, this is what we did. This is the person who approved it. And if it needs to be changed, this is what we're going to do. So document everything just so you can come back to it down the lane. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is probably one of my favorite slides. Andrew did a fantastic job of documenting exactly how he works with some of his teaming projects. So we probably won't be able to get into this in a lot of detail. Please take a screenshot of this. We will post this on the 𝗍𝗻𝗻 site as well, and happy to answer any questions. But these are the 5 steps in terms of how you can define your next AI project. First, document the requirements in writing. Have them in a Word document before you even get into an AI tool. 2, make sure your initial prompt has as many parameters or as many details as needed without getting too creative right from the get-go, because you want to make sure initially when you're giving it the prompt has information about what's the color, what's the style, what's the accessibility, what's the mobile responsiveness you have in place. Because the more you add it in that step 2, the more likely you're going to get to your final product with any LLM tool. So step 2 is really important. Step 3, refine and iterate. As we've seen, good prompt, better prompt, best prompt. Always you want to get it into a iterative exercise. 4th, Andrew's favorite and my favorite, make sure you audit all of these for accessibility and mobile responsiveness to make sure you are reaching more learners and increasing your learner outcomes. And 5, seek institutional approval. As you can see here, every image that we have used, we have a specific note at the bottom that specifically says the source for that image. Make sure you are doing the same and never not be the human in the loop. Every AI will have and must have the human in the loop before it goes to the end learner. Wish I could go more, but I know we are out of time. So we will catch you all again in our next session. But this is the final tip. Any last minute questions, Andrew or the team? Wonderful. So just a quick note, we will have the slides on the Stanford Innovative Edge site, and then the recording will be available in some time. And then in a few months, this will be available on YouTube as well. As always, if any of you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to continue the discussion. Happy prompting.